The unexpected encounter. A shimmering silver object floated silently in the dark sky, its surface reflecting the glow of Earth's moon. It wasn't a satellite or a plane. This was something entirely alien. The world held its breath as the strange vessel hovered over the Pacific Ocean, visible to millions. Governments scrambled to respond, but it was clear. Humanity was no longer alone. Among the chosen few sent to make first contact was Dr. Alan Hayes, a biologist known for his research on human evolution. Alan was both nervous and excited. Like everyone else, he had dreamed of meeting extraterrestrial life, but now that the moment had arrived, it felt almost surreal. The alien ship was unlike anything the team had ever seen. It had no visible engines or seams, just a smooth metallic surface that seemed to ripple like liquid. As Alan and the other scientists stepped into the ship, they were greeted by an otherworldly being. She was tall and slender, her skin a soft lavender hue that shimmered in the light. Her eyes were large and golden, filled with a calm intelligence. Her name was Kira, and she introduced herself as the ambassador of the Zirith, a race known for their advanced technology and intellect. "Greetings, humans," Kira said, her voice smooth and melodic. "I have come to evaluate your species. We have observed your world from afar, and now it is time to decide if humanity is ready to interact with the greater universe." Her words sent a ripple of unease through the team. Ellen noticed the way she looked at them, not with fear or curiosity, but with a quiet sense of superiority. It was clear she didn't think much of humans. Kira's gaze landed on Alan. "You are a biologist," she said, her tone almost dismissive. "You study the primitive processes of your kind." Alan bristled at her words but kept his voice steady. "Primitive. We see reproduction and life as miracles, not something to dismiss." Kira raised an eyebrow. "Miracles? That is an emotional interpretation. Your species relies on inefficient, messy methods to continue your existence. The Zirith evolved beyond such things long ago." Her words hung in the air, challenging everything Alan had ever known. He wanted to argue, but he sensed that Kira wasn't here to listen to debates. She had already made up her mind. The team spent hours talking to Kira, explaining Earth's cultures, sciences, and history. Yet no matter what they said, Kira seemed unimpressed. She studied them as one might study an insect, fascinated by the details but disconnected from the experience. When the team returned to their base, Alan couldn't shake the feeling that Kira's visit was not just about observation. There was something she wasn't telling them. Her comments about reproduction, about humanity's primitive nature, seemed too pointed to be casual. That night, Alan stood by the ocean, staring up at the alien ship glowing faintly in the sky. He thought about Kira's words, her cold logic, and her dismissal of human life. He thought about the millions of mothers, fathers, and children who would never understand why Kira found them so unworthy. As he watched the waves crash against the shore, a single question burned in his mind. What would it take to change her mind? Unbeknownst to Alan, Kira was watching him from the ship. For the first time in her long life, she felt something unfamiliar, curiosity, not just about humans, but about the emotions they carried. Yet she dismissed the feeling. Emotions, she told herself, were a weakness, something her species had transcended long ago. Still, as the stars twinkled above, a small part of her wondered, could there be something humanity understood that the Zirith had forgotten? And so, the stage was set for an encounter that would challenge both human and alien beliefs, one that would question the very meaning of life itself. Humanity under examination. The Zirith ship hovered over Earth like a silent observer, its smooth metallic surface reflecting the planet's blue glow. On board, Kira walked through the softly lit corridors of her vessel, her thoughts racing. Her mission was clear: observe, evaluate, and determine if humanity had earned its place among the advanced civilizations of the galaxy. Yet something about these humans nagged at her, a strange contradiction between their simplicity and their resilience. Kira descended to Earth, her shimmering form hidden by a cloaking device. She walked among humans for the first time, her presence unnoticed by the crowds bustling through the city streets. Their faces carried a mix of emotions: joy, sadness, hope, and frustration. The spectrum of feelings was overwhelming. Unlike the calm logic her people maintained, Kira's golden eyes scanned her surroundings with clinical precision, yet she couldn't deny a growing curiosity. Dr. Alan Hayes, meanwhile, had not stopped thinking about Kira's sharp critique of humanity. Determined to prove her wrong, he worked tirelessly to gather examples of what made humans extraordinary. When he received word that Kira had requested a guide to observe human life firsthand, Alan volunteered immediately. The next day, Alan met Kira at a bustling hospital. The setting was intentional, a place where the fragility of human life met its indomitable will to survive. Kira's holographic translator shimmered as she observed the chaos around her. "This is where you begin?" Kira asked, her voice calm but tinged with skepticism. "A place of sickness and suffering?" Alan nodded. "Yes, but it's also a place of hope and healing. You'll see." As they walked through the corridors, Kira watched doctors and nurses rush from room to room. She saw a young child crying as a nurse tended to her scraped knee, a worried father pacing outside a surgery room, and a frail elderly woman laughing with her granddaughter. "Why do you hold on to such emotional bonds?" Kira asked. "They cause pain and distraction." Alan stopped and turned to her. "Because those bonds give life meaning. Without them, what's the point of survival?" Kira raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Her attention was drawn to a nearby room where a woman was in labor. Through the observation window, she saw the mother gripping the hand of her partner, tears streaming down her face. Doctors surrounded her, offering calm reassurance. "What is happening here?" Kira asked, her tone shifting to one of genuine curiosity. "She's giving birth," Alan said, "bringing new life into the world." Kira tilted her head. "It seems inefficient, painful. Why would anyone willingly endure this?" Alan smiled faintly. "Because it's worth it. That child will carry their hopes, dreams, and legacy. For humans, creating life is more than survival. It's about connection." Kira watched as the newborn's first cries filled the room. The parents wept with joy, their emotions raw and unfiltered. Something stirred within her, an emotion she couldn't quite name. She dismissed it quickly, attributing it to the intensity of the scene. "I see the mechanics of it," Kira said, her voice measured. "But it still seems primitive. Your species clings to emotions as if they are a strength. In truth, they are a weakness that clouds judgment." Alan sighed. "Maybe. Or maybe they're the reason we've survived as long as we have. Empathy, love, hope. They push us to do better, to care for one another. That's what makes us human." Before Kira could respond, an emergency erupted in the hospital. A massive accident had occurred nearby, and injured patients were flooding in. Kira observed the chaos as doctors and nurses moved with practiced urgency, working together seamlessly to save lives. She watched as Alan jumped in to help, assisting where he could. One moment in particular caught her attention. A young boy, no older than 6, clung to Alan as he reassured him with gentle words. Despite the fear in his eyes, Alan's kindness brought the boy comfort. Kira felt something then, a faint tug in her chest, unfamiliar and unsettling. She dismissed it again, turning her focus to the larger scene. The humans' coordinated effort to save lives, their determination to fight against death, was undeniable. Still, she couldn't reconcile their chaotic emotions with her species' cold logic. Later, as the chaos settled and the hospital returned to its usual rhythm, Kira and Alan sat in the quiet of the hospital garden. The night sky stretched above them, stars twinkling like tiny beacons. "You saw everything today," Alan said. "The pain, the struggle, the joy. Do you still think we're just primitive?" Kira looked up at the stars, her expression unreadable. "I see potential," she admitted after a long pause. "But I also see inefficiency. Your species clings to old ways, to biological processes that hinder progress." Ellen chuckled softly. "Maybe, but those old ways are what make us who we are." Kira turned to him, her golden eyes meeting his. "We shall see, Dr. Hayes. My evaluation is not yet complete." As she rose and walked away, Alan couldn't help but wonder if her cold logic was beginning to thaw. In her eyes, he saw a flicker of something new, curiosity, perhaps even doubt. And deep within Kira, though she refused to admit it, a seed of understanding had been planted. The question now was whether it would grow. A growing curiosity. The Zereth ambassador, Kira, stood silently in the observation deck of her ship, staring at the sprawling Earth below. Her golden eyes reflected the planet's vibrant colors. Oceans, forests, cities teeming with life. Humanity was unlike anything she had encountered before. They were flawed, emotional, and disorganized, yet they thrived against odds that would break most species. But Kira was not here to admire them. Her mission was to evaluate, to decide if Earth's inhabitants deserved to be part of the greater galactic community. The previous day's visit to the hospital had left her unsettled. Watching the humans' chaotic yet determined fight to save lives had triggered a faint echo of something she couldn't define. It was a feeling, an unwelcome crack in the Zereth philosophy that emotions were weaknesses. Her thoughts were interrupted by Dr. Alan Hayes's voice over the communicator. "Kira, I thought you might want to see more of humanity in action today. If you're willing, I'd like to show you something different." Kira hesitated. Alan's persistence was both irritating and intriguing. His unwavering belief in humanity's value was unlike the cold rationality of her people. Against her better judgment, she agreed. "Very well, Dr. Hayes. I will meet you." Hours later, Kira found herself in a bustling marketplace in a small town. Unlike the sterile, controlled environments of her own species, this place was vibrant and noisy. Children ran through the streets, vendors called out their wares, and the air was thick with the scents of spices and fresh food. "This is chaos," Kira said, her tone sharp as she observed the scene. Alan grinned. "It's called life. You might learn something." As they walked, Alan introduced her to various people. There was a baker who shared stories of his family's recipes, a musician who played a melody that made the crowd pause, and a farmer who spoke of the season's impact on his crops. Kira watched, listened, and observed the way these humans connected, not through logic, but through shared experiences. "What purpose does this serve?" Kira asked, her curiosity barely concealed. "All this interaction, this exchange of stories and goods, it seems inefficient." Alan stopped near a small cafe and gestured around them. "It serves a deeper purpose than you might think. These connections, these stories, they're how we build trust, how we create community. It's not about efficiency, it's about meaning." Kira tilted her head. "Meaning is a subjective construct. It has no place in an advanced civilization." Alan chuckled. "Maybe that's why your people sent you here, to remember what they've forgotten." As the day went on, Alan took Kira to a nearby park. Families picnicked, children played, and elderly couples strolled hand in hand. Kira noticed the way people smiled at each other, the easy warmth in their interactions. It was foreign to her, this openness, this vulnerability. Her attention was drawn to a young girl sitting alone, her face streaked with tears. Alan knelt beside the child, his voice soft and comforting. "Hey there, what's wrong?" The girl sniffled and pointed to a broken toy in her hands. Alan gently took the toy and examined it. "I think we can fix this," he said, his smile reassuring. Kira watched as Alan used a simple toolkit to repair the toy. When he handed it back, the girl's face lit up with pure joy. She hugged the toy tightly before running back to her family. "Why did you do that?" Kira asked, her voice betraying a hint of confusion. "Because it mattered to her," Alan replied simply. Sometimes, making a difference doesn't require grand gestures. It's the little things that count. Kira was silent, processing his words. Her people had long abandoned such notions, prioritizing progress and efficiency above all else. Yet here was a species that found strength in small acts of kindness, in bonds that defied logic. Later that evening, Alan took Kira to an observatory. As the sky darkened, stars began to appear, their light piercing the velvet blackness. Kira felt a strange sense of familiarity. These stars were her home, yet they felt distant now. Alan pointed to a cluster of stars. "That's where your people come from, right?" Kira nodded. "Yes, we evolved beyond the need for emotional bonds. It is why we have thrived." "But have you truly thrived?" Alan asked, his tone gentle. "Or have you just survived? There's a difference." Kira turned to him, her golden eyes narrowing. "Survival is all that matters." "Maybe," Alan said, his gaze fixed on the stars. "But survival without meaning is empty. That's what we've learned as humans. Our connections, our emotions, they're what make life worth living." Kira didn't respond, but his words lingered in her mind. For the first time, she wondered if the Zirith had truly evolved, or if they had lost something vital in their pursuit of perfection. As the stars continued to shine, Kira felt the faint tug of curiosity growing stronger. It was no longer just about observing humanity. She wanted to understand them. And in that moment, she realized her evaluation of Earth was becoming far more complex than she had anticipated. Crisis and connection. The Zirith ship, a gleaming monument to technological perfection, now carried a shadow of uncertainty. For the first time in centuries, Kira's people faced a problem their intellect could not solve. A mysterious illness was spreading among them, weakening even the most resilient minds and bodies. The Zirith were a race that had abandoned their biological imperfections long ago, evolving into beings of pure logic and efficiency. Yet now, it was their very biology, or lack thereof, that was failing them. Kira, still stationed on Earth for her evaluation, received an urgent transmission from her superiors. The message was cold and clinical, as all Zirith communication was, but its implications were dire. "Kira," the voice intoned, "the illness is accelerating. We suspect the exposure to Earth's atmosphere may have introduced variables our systems cannot neutralize. Your mission remains unchanged, but any insights into human biology could assist in our containment efforts." Kira closed the transmission, her golden eyes narrowing. The idea of seeking help from a primitive species like humanity was unthinkable, but the desperation in her leaders' voices was unmistakable. Still, she resolved to keep the illness a secret from the humans. The Zirith prided themselves on their superiority, and admitting weakness to a species they deemed primitive would be unacceptable. The next morning, Kira met Dr. Alan Hayes at a bustling research center. Alan, ever the optimist, had arranged for Kira to observe some of humanity's greatest scientific achievements. Laboratories hummed with activity, researchers debated theories, and experiments were conducted with an energy that felt almost chaotic to Kira's orderly mind. "This is where we push the boundaries of knowledge," Alan said, gesturing to the rows of researchers. "We're not as advanced as your people, but we're always striving to improve." Kira nodded absently, her mind preoccupied with the crisis aboard her ship. Still, she couldn't deny the humans' ingenuity. Their ability to adapt, to solve problems with limited resources, was something the Zirith had long abandoned in favor of perfection. As they toured the facility, Kira's attention was drawn to a section devoted to immunology and genetic research. Alan introduced her to Dr. Maya Chen, a specialist in human immune systems. "This is Kira," Alan said, keeping his introduction simple. "She's here to learn about our species." Dr. Chen smiled warmly. "Well, you've come to the right place. The human immune system is a masterpiece of evolution. It's not perfect, but its adaptability is unmatched." Kira listened as Dr. Chen explained the intricacies of human biology, the way the immune system could recognize threats, adapt, and even remember past infections to protect against future ones. It was inefficient by Zereth standards, but it had a raw elegance that Kira couldn't ignore. That evening, as Alan and Kira walked through the quiet streets of the city, Alan noticed her uncharacteristic silence. "You've been distracted all day," he said. "What's going on?" Kira hesitated, her pride battling with the growing weight of her concerns. Finally, she spoke. "My people are facing a crisis. An illness has spread among us, one that we cannot cure." Alan stopped in his tracks. "An illness? I thought your people were immune to disease." "So did we," Kira admitted. "Our biology is controlled, optimized. But this illness targets something fundamental, something we thought we had transcended." Alan's brow furrowed. "And you think humans might have the answer?" Kira hesitated again, then nodded. "Your biology is resilient, adaptable in ways ours is not. But this is not an admission of weakness. It is a pragmatic decision." Alan ignored her attempt to downplay the situation. "If you let us help, we will. That's what we do." Kira looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Why? What would your species gain from helping us?" Alan smiled faintly. "We don't need to gain anything. Sometimes, helping is just the right thing to do." The following days were a whirlwind of collaboration. Kira reluctantly provided samples of Zereth genetic material, and human scientists worked tirelessly to analyze the illness. Dr. Chen and her team discovered that the Zereth had stripped away not just their imperfections, but also their ability to adapt to unforeseen challenges. The illness, a simple earth-borne pathogen, had exploited a vulnerability the Zereth hadn't even realized they had. Kira observed the humans' efforts with a mixture of awe and unease. She watched as they debated theories, tested solutions, and even stayed awake for days to make progress. Their emotional investment, something her people would have dismissed as a distraction, seemed to fuel their determination. Alan, in particular, stood out. His relentless optimism and belief in humanity's ability to make a difference were infectious. Kira found herself drawn to his energy, even as she struggled to understand it. One night, as they worked late in the lab, Kira finally voiced a question that had been gnawing at her. "Why do you care so much? About your species, about helping others, even about me?" Alan looked up from his notes, surprised by her question. "Because it's who we are. We're not perfect, Kira, but we're stronger together. Our connections make us more than the sum of our parts." Kira fell silent, the weight of his words settling over her. For the first time, she wondered if the Zereth pursuit of perfection had come at too high a cost. Their cold logic had ensured survival, but had it stripped them of what made life truly meaningful? As the humans closed in on a potential cure, Kira found herself at a crossroads. Her people's survival depended on embracing a solution born of the very emotions and imperfections they had long rejected. And as she stood on the brink of this decision, Kira realized that her evaluation of humanity was no longer just about them. It was also about the Zereth and what they had lost in their quest for perfection. The question now was whether Kira would have the courage to let humanity save them, and whether the Zereth could accept the help of those they had always deemed inferior. The transformation. The Zereth vessel, once a symbol of unshakable confidence, now felt like a cage of doubt. Kira paced its gleaming corridors, her thoughts clouded by an unfamiliar storm of emotions. She had always prided herself on her species' detachment from feelings, but recent days had challenged that certainty. The humans' resilience, their ability to thrive in chaos, and their relentless hope in the face of adversity had begun to gnaw at her understanding of superiority. But now, a choice loomed before her, one that could change everything. In the human lab, the team was on the brink of a breakthrough. Dr. Maya Chen, Alan, and the other researchers had worked tirelessly to synthesize a cure for the Zereth illness. The pathogen was simple by human standards, but the Zereth immune system, engineered to perfection, lacked the adaptability to fight it. The solution required something revolutionary, a fusion of Zerith and human biology. When Kira was informed, her reaction was swift and defensive. "You're suggesting we contaminate our pure forms with your primitive biology. That's unacceptable." Dr. Chen kept her tone calm but firm. "It's not contamination. It's adaptation. Your immune systems have been optimized to the point of fragility. This treatment could rebuild the flexibility you've lost." Alan stepped forward, his voice steady. "Kira, I know this is hard for you to accept, but sometimes strength comes from embracing what we're afraid of." Kira's golden eyes narrowed. "You assume I fear this. The Zerith do not fear. Then what's stopping you?" Alan asked, his gaze piercing. "If this is about pride, you're risking your people for an idea of perfection that's failing you." Kira said nothing, her silence betraying the war within her. For the first time, the ideal she had been raised to believe felt fragile. The Zerith had always seen themselves as above emotion, above weakness. But here she stood, watching humans, flawed, emotional, and imperfect, succeed where her people could not. That night, Kira wandered the ship's observation deck, staring down at Earth. Memories of the past days played in her mind, the human mother clutching her newborn, the young girl's joy over a mended toy, the researchers pouring their hearts into saving lives that weren't even their own. It was a kind of strength she had never known, one born not of logic but of connection. A holographic screen flickered to life, displaying a message from her Zereth superiors. Their tone was cold and detached as always. "Ambassador Kira, we have reviewed the human proposition. While their biology may offer a solution, integrating it into our systems would compromise our evolutionary advancements. Proceed only if there are no alternatives." Kira clenched her fists. Even now, her people refused to admit weakness, but she had seen too much, learned too much, to ignore the truth. The Zereth were not as invincible as they believed, and their rejection of emotion and imperfection was not the strength they thought it to be. Her decision was made. The following day, Kira returned to the lab. The researchers looked up, their faces filled with hope and trepidation. Alan stepped forward. "Kira, have you?" "I will undergo the treatment," Kira interrupted, her voice steady but carrying an edge of vulnerability. "If it succeeds, my people will have no choice but to accept it." Alan's expression softened. "This is the right choice, Kira. You won't regret it." Kira raised an eyebrow. "Regret is an emotion. I do not experience such things." Alan smirked faintly. "If you say so." The procedure was delicate and unprecedented. Using a blend of human and Zereth genetic material, the scientists created a serum designed to stimulate adaptability in Kira's immune system. As the treatment began, Kira felt an unfamiliar sensation, a warmth spreading through her body, a rush of energy that was both exhilarating and unsettling. In the days that followed, Kira experienced something even more surprising. Her senses seemed sharper, her thoughts more vivid. But what startled her most was the emotional depth she began to feel. For the first time, she noticed the beauty in Earth's sunsets, the laughter of children, the quiet courage in Alan's eyes. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a world she had never truly seen. Alan observed her transformation with quiet admiration. "How are you feeling?" Kira hesitated, searching for words. "I feel more. It is difficult to describe." "You're experiencing what we live with every day," Alan said. "It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes painful. But it's also what makes life extraordinary." Word of Kira's transformation spread quickly among the Zereth. Some viewed it as a betrayal, others as a revelation. Her superiors demanded an explanation, but Kira stood firm. "I have seen what humanity can teach us," she said in a transmission to the Zereth Council. "We are not as perfect as we believed. Emotion and imperfection are not weaknesses. They are strengths we have forgotten. If we do not adapt, we will not survive." The Council's response was cold and dismissive. "You have compromised yourself, Ambassador. Your actions will not be endorsed. But Kira no longer cared for their approval. She had found something greater than their sterile ideals. For the first time in her existence, she felt alive. As the Zirith illness waned and the serum proved effective, Kira knew her journey with humanity was far from over. Her transformation was not just physical but philosophical, a shift in understanding that would challenge the Zirith to reconsider their place in the universe. Standing beside Alan one evening, Kira gazed at the stars. "I once thought your species was primitive. Now, I see that you have something we lost long ago." "And what's that?" Alan asked. Kira turned to him, a faint smile softening her features. "The courage to feel." The stars above twinkled like silent witnesses to the beginning of something extraordinary, a bridge between two species, forged not through logic, but through the messy, beautiful strength of humanity. A new understanding. Kira stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean, the wind tugging at her shimmering cloak. Earth's vastness, its raw beauty, felt almost overwhelming. Waves crashed against the rocks below, their rhythm chaotic yet purposeful. For the first time, Kira found herself appreciating the imperfection of it all. The wildness of nature mirrored the humans she had come to observe, flawed, unpredictable, and undeniably alive. Her transformation was complete, yet she felt as if she had only begun to understand what it meant to live. The human serum had not only strengthened her immune system, but had awakened something far deeper, emotions. They surged within her like a tempest, both exhilarating and terrifying. She felt joy, curiosity, and even sorrow, a complex tapestry of feelings her people had long abandoned. Back at the lab, Dr. Alan Hayes and his team monitored the results of Kira's transformation. The data was groundbreaking. The Zirith, who had prided themselves on their biological perfection, were now learning the cost of that perfection. Their rejection of emotion and adaptability had left them vulnerable, and it was humanity's imperfections that had become their salvation. Alan leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen displaying Kira's vitals. "You've become something extraordinary," he said as Kira entered the room. "A bridge between two worlds." Kira tilted her head, her golden eyes studying him. "Extraordinary, perhaps, but not entirely Zirith anymore, and certainly not human. I am something else." Alan smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the point. Change doesn't mean losing who you are. It means becoming something greater." The Zirith Council, however, did not share Alan's optimism. When Kira reported her findings and the success of the human-derived serum, the response was swift and unyielding. "You have compromised your integrity, Ambassador," the Council declared in a cold transmission. "The integration of human biology is a violation of our principles. We will not adopt this solution." Kira's chest tightened, a sensation she now recognized as frustration. "You are blind to the truth," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This illness exposed the fragility of our so-called perfection. The human's adaptability and resilience are not weaknesses. They are strengths we must learn from." The Council remained unmoved. "You have allowed yourself to be corrupted by their influence. Return to Zirith immediately, or face exile." Kira stared at the screen, her mind racing. She knew returning to her people would mean abandoning everything she had learned on Earth, but staying would sever her connection to the Zirith entirely. For the first time in her life, she faced a choice not dictated by logic, but by her own heart. Ellen found Kira in the observatory later that evening, her gaze fixed on the stars. "I heard the Council's response," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." Kira turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Do not be. They are clinging to a system that no longer serves them. But it is difficult to let go of something you've believed in for so long." Ellen nodded. "Change is hard. But it's also how we grow." Kira considered his words, the emotions within her swirling like a storm. "Your people, you embrace imperfection. You make mistakes, yet you continue to evolve. It is both illogical and inspiring." Ellen smiled. That's humanity for you. We're messy, but we make it work. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the moment hanging between them. Finally, Kira spoke. I have made my decision. I will not return to Zereth. They must find their own path, as I have found mine. Kira's decision to stay on Earth sent shockwaves through the Zereth. Her transformation and her defiance of the Council's orders became a subject of heated debate among her people. Some viewed her as a traitor, while others saw her as a pioneer. For the first time in centuries, the Zereth were forced to confront the limitations of their philosophy. Meanwhile, Kira immersed herself in human life, learning not just about their science, but about their culture, art, and history. She visited schools, hospitals, and even small villages, observing the myriad ways humans connected with one another. Each experience deepened her understanding and strengthened her belief that emotion and imperfection were not weaknesses but vital parts of existence. One day, Alan invited Kira to a community gathering in his hometown. Families shared meals, children played, and musicians filled the air with melodies. Kira watched as people laughed, danced, and celebrated life's simple joys. She felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of belonging she had never experienced among her own people. A young boy approached her, holding a small flower. For you, he said shyly. Kira took the flower, her golden eyes softening. Thank you, she said, her voice gentle. The boy smiled and ran off, leaving Kira to marvel at the simplicity of the gesture. Alan joined her, a knowing smile on his face. You're starting to get it, aren't you? Kira nodded. I understand now. It is not perfection that defines a species, but the ability to connect, to grow, and to find meaning in each other. As the stars lit up the night sky, Kira stood among the humans, no longer an outsider, but a part of something greater. She had come to Earth as a judge, certain of humanity's inferiority. Now she saw them for what they truly were, a beacon of hope, a reminder that strength lies not in perfection, but in the courage to embrace imperfection. And for the first time, Kira felt at peace, not as a Zereth, not as a human, but as something entirely new. The Zereth Council's response came swiftly. A holographic transmission appeared before Kira, displaying the faces of her superiors. Their expressions were stoic, but Kira could sense the unease beneath their calm exteriors. Ambassador Kira, the council leader began. Your actions have defied our principles. You have aligned yourself with a primitive species and compromised our integrity. Kira stood tall. I have aligned myself with truth. Our perfection is a facade, and you know it. Humanity has shown me what we have lost, what we must regain to survive. The council's leader narrowed his eyes. You risk everything for a species you barely know. I risk everything, Kira said, her voice unwavering, because without change, we are already lost. The days that followed were tense. The council did not respond immediately, leaving Kira and the humans in a state of anxious anticipation. Meanwhile, the broadcast had ignited discussions across the Zereth. For the first time, ordinary citizens began questioning the council's decisions. Some demanded the cure, while others called for Kira's punishment. Kira remained resolute. She knew the council's pride would not allow them to admit she was right, but the voices of their people might force their hand. At last, the council relented. A compromise was announced. The cure would be adopted, but Kira would remain exiled from Zereth society. To the council, she was a necessary sacrifice, a reminder of their failure, too dangerous to welcome back. Kira accepted their decision with quiet dignity. Exile is a small price to pay, she told Alan, if it means my people will survive. Alan's expression softened. You've done something incredible, Kira. You've given them a chance to grow, even if they can't see it yet. As the first Zereth ships descended to Earth to retrieve the cure, Kira stood alongside Alan, watching the exchange. Though she felt the sting of separation from her people, she also felt a deep sense of purpose. Her journey had led her to a new understanding. not just of humanity, but of herself. In the days that followed, Kira chose to remain on Earth, embracing her new life among the humans. She became a symbol of unity, a reminder that even the most rigid beliefs could be challenged, and that change, no matter how difficult, was the key to survival. As she gazed at the stars one last time, Kira felt a quiet peace. She was no longer just a Zereth or an observer of humanity. She was a bridge between worlds, a living testament to the power of imperfection and the courage to transform. The ultimate sacrifice. The sun was setting over the horizon, casting golden hues across the landscape. Kira stood on a hill overlooking a small Earth village, her lavender skin catching the fading light. Behind her, Alan Hayes approached quietly, carrying a datapad with the latest reports from the Zereth ship. "Kira," Alan began, his tone serious. "The Council has escalated their stance. They're planning to withdraw completely from Earth's orbit. No further contact. They're cutting you off." Kira turned to him, her golden eyes unreadable. "I suspected as much. They see my actions as a betrayal. To them, I am no longer Zereth." Alan frowned. "They're making a mistake. You've shown them the value of change, of adapting. Why can't they see that?" "Because change is frightening," Kira replied. "It challenges everything they believe. To admit their system is flawed would unravel centuries of certainty." Alan stepped closer, his expression resolute. "And you? What do you believe now?" Kira looked at him, her gaze steady. "I believe humanity has shown me a truth my people have forgotten. That strength is not the absence of flaws, but the ability to grow despite them. I will not turn away from that truth, even if it means standing alone." As the days passed, tensions between Kira and her people grew. The Zereth illness, though no longer fatal, had left many weakened, and the Council's refusal to adopt the human-derived cure only deepened the divide. Kira's name was whispered in both reverence and scorn. Some called her a savior, while others branded her a traitor. But Kira's resolve remained unshaken. She had found a purpose beyond the sterile logic of her upbringing, to bridge the gap between her people and humanity. And she knew the first step would require an act of courage unlike any she had ever imagined. One evening, Alan found Kira standing outside the research facility, her gaze fixed on the night sky. She held a small device in her hand, a Zereth communication relay, its edges glowing faintly. "What's that?" Alan asked, gesturing to the device. Kira turned it over in her hands. "A beacon. If activated, it will transmit a message directly to the Zereth Council and every ship within our network." Alan's eyes widened. "You're going to confront them directly?" Kira nodded. "I will present them with an ultimatum. Accept the cure and the lessons humanity has to offer, or risk extinction." Alan hesitated. "Kira, are you sure about this? They've already threatened you with exile." "I am certain," Kira said firmly, "but I cannot do it alone." The next day, in a global broadcast orchestrated by human scientists, Kira addressed not just the Zereth, but all of Earth. Her image, regal and composed, appeared on screens across the world. "People of Earth, my fellow Zereth," she began, her voice resonating with calm authority. "I speak to you now not as an ambassador, but as an individual who has seen the power of transformation." She recounted her journey, her initial disdain for humanity, the crisis that exposed her people's vulnerabilities, and the lessons she had learned from the humans' resilience and compassion. "My people have long believed that perfection lies in the eradication of flaws," she said, "but I have come to understand that it is our imperfections that make us strong. Humanity thrives not because it is without weakness, but because it embraces change, connection, and hope." The broadcast concluded with Kira's ultimatum. The Zereth could choose to integrate the human-derived cure and begin a new chapter, or they could continue their isolation and risk their survival.